Good evening and welcome to another edition of In Focus. I'm your host, Josh Krupp. Recently, the Academy Awards honored the best of the best in the film world from last year. Perhaps we'll see our guest tonight there someday. Join us on In Focus tonight as we talk to junior cinema major Colt Guthrie about a film he recently completed called The Colourful Mind. We'll also talk to him about a script that he's currently working on. That's all coming up next, only on In Focus. Good evening once again. I'm your host, Josh Krupp, joined alongside junior cinema major Colt Guthrie. Thanks for joining us tonight, Colt.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, who is Colt? Let's get to know you a little bit. Who is Colt Guthrie?
Well, I am me. I guess you could call me a cinephile. I've loved movies since I was little, and ever since I've been able to do something theatrical, I guess, I've been trying my best to do the best at it. So it's for 15 years or so, you know, working with theater productions, prop making, short films with my dad's camcorder back in the day, you know, and now I'm here. So
really production of any kind.
Yeah.
When you were growing up, was this a career that you wanted to pursue, cinema production?
Oh, no, I didn't think about it then. I remember back when I was little, you know, they always had you write these things out in high school. What do you want to do when you grow up? And I always said, scientist. What kind of scientist, I don't know, but I liked science. But the whole thing with movies was more of just kind of a fascination with the story then, and it slowly grew over the years. And then in high school, I finally found out that, you know, I think I want to try and make some of these.
And when did you start looking into colleges that had cinema programs that you could pursue?
Sophomore year, I think, of high school.
And what part of the country are you from, and did Point Park immediately jump on your radar?
I'm from just about 50 miles south of Pittsburgh. So Point Park wasn't a school that I had heard of, but once I started looking for places that had a cinema or film or special effects or anything like that, it popped up immediately. A lot of people that I had talked to about it at high school, like career counselors, fellow students who had people interested in film, they spoke highly of it and the program.
And were there any other schools on your radar, or was Point Park pretty much the one, since 50 miles away and your counselors spoke highly of it?
I had looked at special effects, makeup, and stuff like that it was a trade school near Uniontown. And, you know, there's always schools in New York, LA, things like that, but being so close, it was like the best of the best to come here, I guess.
So far, you're a junior. What are your thoughts on the program so far?
Well, being here for 3 years, I've seen the program grow a lot just in 3 years. It's not very old. I think it's maybe around 10 years old or so. And it's definitely changed a bit since I started school here. What I think of it now is I think it's heading in a very good direction. We're expanding our concentrations. You know, we have a lot more work in audio, and we're starting workshops in production design. So, in all honesty, I think it's headed in the right direction, and I've learned a lot here that I wouldn't have learned had I, you know, tried to do this on my own.
When you say different concentrations, what's your concentration?
Right now I'm concentrating in directing. That's what I'm going to get, you know, the concentration on my certificate for, but I'm also doing a lot in writing. I'd like to be a writer-director.
What experiences have you had so far with the program?
In writing and directing?
As far as directing, you said you're interested in, you've done some writing. We'll talk about a couple of things that you wrote later, but what else have you had the opportunity to do here?
Well, it's a great thing about the program here is that you get to make films every year that you're in the program. So in my first and my second year here, I was able to make a total of 4 films. So I wrote and directed all those. You know, those are just small shorts that teach you the basics of filmmaking. And then last semester in production 3, so the third year film class, I was a writer. So I worked on the script for that, which is a 10-page script, over the majority of the summer, and then a little bit in September when we came back to school and we finished polishing it up. And then right now I'm in the advanced directing and advanced screenwriting classes. So I just finished shoots on 2 3-minute shorts that we did in advanced directing, that I wrote and directed those. And I'm also working on a feature screenplay in advanced screenwriting.
That's a lot of work to do and accomplish in just over 3 years. What have you learned over the 3 years that's really changed who you are today as a filmmaker?
Filmmaking is a hell of a lot of work. That's what's changed me the most. You know, I found that I like directing, I like writing. Those are things that I'm very passionate about. But all the other paperwork and stuff behind the scenes that they really make you do, even as a director, like when you go into the advanced and intermediate classes and all that stuff, if it's the directing class, you know, you're going to make a film and you're going to direct the film. But what they don't tell you is you're also going to produce the film, and you're also going to be the assistant director. So you have to yell at everybody and make sure everybody's on schedule. And you also have to be the line producer and a whole bunch of other jobs that usually, you know, 2, 3 people do. They're all on you, as well as being the creative head of the project. So it's so much more work than what I thought it was when I first came here. You know, I thought I could just tell people, hey, that light needs to be a little more purple, and the frame needs to be just a little different, you know, and tell actors what to do and everything. But figuring out the amount of work that really goes into these productions behind the scenes that even the directors have to do, like pre-production, it's terribly mentally taxing. And it's really made me realize how bad I am at handling so many things at once.
Yeah. And when you look at films, you don't realize and appreciate a lot of times how many people are actually behind the scenes with these things. Let's talk about a film that you were recently behind the making of called The Colourful Mind. First of all, it's spelled color like the Brits spell colorful. Why C-O-L-O-U-R, full mind?
Because we wanted it to be different. That's it.
And it's a great concept. Talk about the concept behind the film, and let's just get a general summary of what the film is.
So the film is set in a futuristic dystopian, state, right? It's run by a totalitarian government. So a la 1984, V for Vendetta, things like that. We drew a lot of specifics and vibes from those types of stories. It's about a girl named Gracie Winters who rediscovers art in this colorless world. And when the government finds out about this, they try and strip it away from her, take this expression that she found. And when they do that, there's this outburst, and she lets her discovery be made public. And so through the second half of the film, the citizens of this state are expressing themselves. They're painting, they're dancing, they're singing, they're making all this music. It's not something that you see on screen, but it's something that it's alluded to. And eventually, Gracie ends up becoming their martyr for this new kind of revolution that's going to overthrow this oppressive government.
And you like directing, you like writing. What did you do with this film?
I was the writer on it, the rewriter specifically. What happened last spring semester is the producers for Production 3 chose a whole bunch of scripts. They chose a total of 6 scripts from a big pool, and they picked the ones that they were going to make, and then they assembled their crews. So I was hired on to the crew for what was originally titled The Canvas, to be the rewriter. Now, it was a 10-page script. It was finished. It was probably, 10th draft or so. But it needed something more. It needed to be a little bigger. It needed to be a little more expansive and a little more polished. So with our ideas, with the producer and the director, we decided to do a page 1 rewrite for that script. We took the script and we threw it in the garbage. and we kept the theme of it. You know, if you read the original canvas and then you see the finished film, you'll see there's a girl in it. She likes to paint. The world has no type of expression like that. And when she paints, she changes things, and she changes people's outlook on life. That's about it. The actions are somewhat similar. There's a jail cell, but I mean, other than that, the script was entirely rewritten over the summer. And I think we've held on to the theme in a nice way, and we've also expanded the story a bit to make it a little more palatable.
Would you call this an original idea or more of an adapted screenplay?
It's an original idea, I suppose. That's kind of strange territory to get into when you're, rewriting. An adapted screenplay would be like something from a book or, a novel or a stage play, something like that. But when it's a screenplay that you take and you rewrite, it's still the same screenplay. It's still an original screenplay.
And the concept is really, really phenomenal, I think. You have the totalitarian, it's the dystopian, futuristic society. What kind of inspirations did you have when you were rewriting this script? In all honesty, the inspiration was the beauty of the art that she was creating and how art can change people's lives. I'm not very big into painting. I like it. I think it's a wonderful art form. I'd like to paint myself, but music is something that really strikes me. So when I thought about it, I was thinking about music, even though the medium in the film is paint, and how much it's changed me and how much it's kind of changed the way I look at things, So I think the premise of the film, the idea about art, a drop of paint on one white canvas in a specific way, changing so much about so many people's lives. I think that's what struck me about the original script, and I think that's what we tried to carry through. So, yeah. So is there any possibility of this getting remade into maybe a full-length film in the future?
The producer and I, well, one of the producers, because we had two on the film, we were originally talking about that during production, and we thought, this is going to be pretty good when it's finished, but it's a little too large at this point. Like, our ideas for it are a little too large for just 10 minutes. So we were originally thinking about expanding it into maybe a 30, 40-minute short film, and, working on it, spending 4 months in this kind of group of a bunch of creative people. You have problems, you have differences, and then you also have great collaboration and stuff like that. So spending a time working on something that you love can be very tiresome. So doing it again is probably not something in the future at this point.
And you have to spend a lot of time on it. You also have to spend some money. Mm-hmm. What was the funding process like going into this film?
Well, for production 3, the school actually provides you with a budget of $2,000. Now, if you know anything about production, that is not at all a reasonable budget. It can buy you craft services for a weekend, maybe 2, right? And they only limit you to about $500 for craft services for, 6 days of production. So we got $2,000, but we knew it wasn't going to be enough because of the amount of stuff we needed. So we started an Indiegogo campaign, and I think our goal was a couple thousand or so. I forget exactly. I wasn't heavily involved in that. But we ended up raising about another $1,000, $1,500. So in total, we had about $3,000 or so to spend on this, and that was through the school as well as Indiegogo.
So funding is always a challenge when you're trying to put together a movie, especially on a college budget. What other challenges came up during the pre-production process?
Differences in creative direction. That's it's a nice way of putting it, I guess. One of the producers and myself we were deeply involved in this for a while before we started, actually working on it last spring semester. So when the director came on and a few of the other crew members, they had ideas that were different than ours, and you know, those were kind of the major problems, I guess. It really boils down to the director when you have things like that and what they want to do. So what ended up on the screen is hopefully what our director had in mind for the films. You know, it doesn't really matter what the writer wants. The writer just writes the pages. The director interprets it, you know, and tells the story. So the majority of the problems we had were with collaboration, but I think it all worked out in the end, and we made something that's at least watchable.
And what sort of differences did you see from the idea that you put on paper to what the director envisioned?
Actually, a couple scenes that I had written were cut either due to problems with with the production of them, you know, getting a location or actions in the script that weren't actually, you know, viable for us for such a short time. And so a few scenes were cut, I think, but for the betterment of the film, for ease of production. You know, when you read something, you have a different picture in your mind than the next 1,000 people that are going to read it. So, in all honesty, any differences that I pick up are because when I was writing it, I was picturing it one specific way, but there's literally an infinite number of ways that it can be, you know, seen, created.
A lot of times on the show, we like to show a preview of the film or the whole film itself, and we can't do that quite yet because the film's getting entered into a few festivals. Mm-hmm. Talk about the festivals that the film's getting entered into.
Well, we've submitted it to 3 separate festivals, I believe. The choices of those were between the producers and the director. I'm not exactly sure which ones those 3 are, but I do know for a fact that it's going to be going to Cannes in France. So our director is actually interning there, so she's going to be taking the film with her to there, and it's going to be premiering there as opposed to just being screened at the school. And then it'll be doing about 3 festivals on the festival circuit. I don't know if it's going anywhere else yet.
And you talked about screening at the school. When was it screened at the school, and when can we expect to see it again and it be released to the public?
It was screened at the Production 3 screenings back in early December, before winter break. And in all honesty, I'm not exactly sure when we'll be able to release it to the public. I'd say by next year, because I'm not exactly sure when all the festivals are. I'm assuming that they're probably going to be ending in early fall. So probably by the end of this year, early next.
What was the reaction like when you screened it in December?
Well, this is just a secret, but they always put the best films last, and ours was dead last.
Well, that's
good. People seem to really like it. A few members of my family told me, you know, it was the best one, but I don't know if that's because, you know, it's just the one that I worked on or if it was actually that good. But a lot of people really liked it. A lot of people showed a positive reaction, and I've heard a few people say, you know, this one was good and yours was great, and this other one was terrible. But so it seems like the overall idea was that it was pretty good.
Hopefully it's well received in the festivals. What are your goals for the festivals?
Just get the film out there, you know, get everybody's name that's on it, you know, out into the world of cinema. There's not a whole lot of stuff that we really have right now, you know, as third-year film students that we've actually put out at this magnitude. So, you know, when this goes to the festivals, people are going to be seeing our names on the big screen. You know, they'll be seeing the producers, the director, my name, the cinematographer, everybody else who's worked on it. So the idea is just, you know, put another drop in the bucket of creative stuff that's out there, aside from our reels, which nobody sees unless they, you know, ask us to do work for them.
And there's directors, there were producers, there was you. How many people would you think were actually involved in the production aspect of the film?
Let's see. Probably there was 8 on our crew. Those are pretty much department heads, you know, producers, directors, writers, production design, cinematography, editing. And then we had a B crew, which was the production crew for a separate film. Ours was, our sister crew was from Full Speed, which is another great Production 3 film if you're interested in seeing it. So we had about 16 people or so, and then we had a few outside people come on as grips, PAs, and stuff like that. So on an average shoot, our production crew would have been about 20-some people.
You gathered a lot of these people from the Production 3 class then?
Yeah, yeah. The majority of them were from our class. A few of them were freshman cinema majors because they're required to be on set for P3. And a few of them were just, our friends who had the time to come over and, hold a light stand or push a dolly or whatever.
And how did you go about casting the film?
We held casting calls. Actually, the entirety of Production 3 held casting calls back in early fall. Right after we got back, right after the scripts were locked, two weeks into the semester, we held casting calls, kind of just open for anybody who wants to come. And everybody, the producers and the directors from the film sat down and watched dozens of actors come in and just read stuff, do monologues. So I believe we pulled at least one or two of our actors from that, what we saw there. And then we held a casting call ourselves that we put out on this great website called The Casting Pit, which is for local acting and filmmaking talent here in Pittsburgh. And we also contacted a few agents, I believe.
And did you have any say in the casting process? And if you didn't, what were your thoughts on the actors and the actresses in the movie?
Writers usually don't get a say in casting. It's for P3 they want it to be close to the real world, right? Mm-hmm. But in all honesty, writers never have a say in that, and they would always ask me, "Hey, what do you think of this? Do you want to see the tape we have from the casting call?" I was like, "Nah, not really. It's not really my place to say. So it's up to the producers and the directors." What I do think about the casting, though, is that it was pretty great. We had very talented actors. We had two from Carnegie Mellon. Isabel played Gracie. She's from Carnegie Mellon, and Asa played the boy in the jail cell. And we also were very lucky to get this guy named Edwin, who is a professional actor. He works a lot in New York, and he has a recurring role on Law & Order SVU. A funny thing, I didn't know exactly how famous this guy was. I knew he was very talented, but when I told my mother the guy's name and said that he was in Law & Order, she says, "Oh, I know who that is." And wow. This guy who works on television professionally was working on our film. This small little $3,000 production.
That's crazy. And I understand you were also the script supervisor for the film.
Oh, yeah.
What was your role with that? And you actually got to go on set, something the writer usually doesn't do.
Yeah, I wish that I didn't have to. It was an interesting experience. It was, it's very analytical. It's almost mathematical sometimes. You have to watch the monitor. You have to stay glued to the monitor and really watch every shot and make sure that the continuity is perfect. That's your job as a script supervisor. You have to make sure that if this camera's here in this shot, then in the close-up it's also right there and nobody moves it. It was taxing. By the end of the day, everybody else was physically exhausted. I was mentally exhausted because I had to watch the monitor and write down on my little notepad, shot number, what lens they were on, how fast it went, if the director liked the take or not. It was a bad experience.
How many days did it take to film?
We shot the whole film over the course of 2 weekends and one pickup weekend. So in total, it was about half of Thursday each weekend, so about 7 days of production. And then anything that we needed to get, any shots we needed to pick up, we would go into on our pickup weekend, which was 2-3 days.
And you're currently working on another script right now. Let's move into that a little bit. What is this script that you're working on right now about?
Brace yourself. It's a Western horror film.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's called Tooth and Claw, and it's about a young woman in 1889. Her name is Annabelle Roth, and she travels across Old West America in search of the werewolf that killed her father when she was little. Now, she later finds an unassuming ally in this guy, Jack Quinton, who's a bounty hunter that's after the werewolf for his own reasons. Now, when he's cursed by the werewolf, Annabelle has to decide between her personal vendetta and Jack's life, but she is eventually able to destroy the werewolf and, save the day.
It's a very interesting concept. Two films that are very different and very unique. What was the inspiration behind this film?
Well, 80s action movies, werewolves, and westerns. I love all three of those things. I thought, well, what happens if you put them all together? So it's a work of sheer passion and love. Like, I love the subject matter. I love Western films. I love werewolves. I think they're one of the coolest, gothic horror creatures that came out of that whole period, with Dracula and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and, all those early Universal films, too, that were based on a lot of that stuff. It fascinates me. And be able to put them together in kind of what I think is going to be a much better action horror film than all these other ones like Van Helsing and things like that. It's just, that's why I love it, because I want to make a good film, and I want to write a good script for things that I really, really like.
Is this for a class, or is this on your own?
This is actually for the advanced screenwriting class. So by the end of this semester, 14 weeks, terribly short amount of time to write a feature, I'll have written between 90 and about 120 pages.
When can we expect to see this then on the screen?
I have no idea. Hopefully I'll be able to direct it at some point. So a while from now, a long time, but I really want to make it.
You're going to be directing this film as well as writing the script, and that's a lot of work from what we've heard already about all the work that goes into a film. What challenges are you expecting with this film to arise, and how are you going to adapt to those based on what you've learned with the Colourful Mind film?
Well, I think the problem, first and foremost, is actually having someone buy the script. Actually getting a production company to say, hey, this is good, let's make that. At this point in time, the professor keeps telling me this, and I've also seen it myself. This type of film that I'm writing, it's a little formulaic, I suppose. There's a lot of stuff kind of out here in the early 2000s that is similar to this. So right now would be a good time to sell the script if it was polished, if it was the right length and everything was great and it flowed just perfectly. My fear is that in 10, 20 years, at the point where I feel like I'm ready to make something like this, would be actually selling it and seeing if people want to make it. And then, of course, having the option to direct it myself, that's another battle to get through. Like, I want to make this film, I want to make sure that it's the way that I want it to be.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Entering this school year, what's something that you wish you would have known when you entered school this year?
How much I was going to hate Production 3. It was a thing, all right. It was interesting to go about learning that way. There's a lot of people who say Production 3 was the worst class I've ever taken, but the fact of the matter is you learn a whole lot by experiencing a whole lot of bad stuff. There's just a lot of bad vibes, a lot of anger, and a lot of tension in that, but that's how film sets work, So going into Production 3, I wish that I had known just how painful it was going to be. There's a great quote that says, show me a film set without any problems and I'll show you a dull film, right? So I guess that's why the majority of our films are really good, because we all had problems.
Yeah. And real quick, in just a few words, what are your future goals?
Finish the script that I'm working on, direct some movies, and then direct that script.
Well, Colt, thanks for joining us today. It was great talking with you. We look forward to everything that is in store for you for the future. For now, we're going to take a break and take a week off here on In Focus. Join us next time for the next aspiring film director to see what he or she is coming up with. Thanks for joining us. I'm Josh Croup. This is Colt Guthrie. You've been watching In Focus.